if you're going for perfection, you can't do it. So you will fail by definition. When you fail, that hurts. And it makes people angry. And that's why perfectionists often are so hard on other people around them, right? Because they see imperfections in others. They become very judgmental because they're embittered. And it's the opposite of leadership, falling into that. So you don't want to go for that. You want to go for self-improvement. You want to get better. Better is always possible. Perfect is never possible.
What does it take to make a great leader? It's a question that we need to ponder, that we should wonder and ask, not just of each other, but sometimes it's a question that you must look in the mirror and ask yourself. The reality is, when it comes to leadership, some people will tell you that leaders are born, and others tell you that leaders are made and developed. And whatever is in the truth, I just know that I've been around leaders who have hurt things, broken things, and ruined things. I've also been around leaders who have elevated things and taken things and people to places that they never thought they could go before. Great leadership is something that we can't overlook or underestimate the importance of. And if you're listening today, the chances are you're a leader, maybe in your home, maybe in your business, maybe in your school or somewhere else. The chances are you are already a leader. And I have brought on an expert to talk to you about leadership. He formed as a leader in life and then was leading in schools and administration. And now he's going out with a message to bring the world about how you truly learn to lead the right way. So today, without further ado, I want to bring in Dr. Jim Salvucci. Welcome to Hope Rising.
Thanks for having me, Maurice. This is great.
You are so welcome. So for someone who doesn't know you, how do you introduce yourself? Who do you say you are, and what do you say you do?
I usually give what I call my origin story. So how I got on this path. So I'll give you that. So I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and I was thrust into leadership positions even as a kid. I was in a Boy Scout troop, small troop, and I was something like this most senior person in the troop when I was like age 12 or 13. Had to run meetings, plan camping trips, the whole 9 yards. Had no idea what I was doing. And constantly my whole life, I kept getting thrust into leadership positions. I was a boss at age 18. I had employees, had to be at work, figure these things out all along. And every time I was thrust in these positions, I would just sort of intuit my way through. And I got to be a pretty good, what I call gut leader, right?
A gut leader.
I don't believe anyone's really truly born to leadership, but some people have more acumen for it than others, like anything. And so I was pretty good at it. Eventually I got into higher ed. I became an English professor, and then I became naturally a faculty leader. Was running the faculty council at the school I was at, and I was asked to head up our reaccreditation. Every 10 years, the school has to be reaccredited. It's a major undertaking, like a 2.5-year process. And I was put in charge of that. And, so I was doing my gut leadership thing and making it work. And then they asked me to become a dean. And they said, we want you to move in administration. We want you to be a dean. We want you to be the dean of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. Great. Love that idea. Except there was no School of Humanities and Social Sciences. So dean of the Humanities and Social Sciences. And this was the story of my life. Okay. So get into that situation. I think, this isn't that hard. It's just putting this with that. That's how you put together a school. This discipline goes with that discipline. The hard part was getting it up and running and keeping it running. That took leadership. And it took a higher level of leadership than what I had before. I knew I had to up my game. So I looked at my bosses. It was the provost and the president above me. And they were bosses. They weren't good leaders. And I make a strict distinction between leaders and bosses. I looked at my peers. They're flailing around wildly. They didn't know what they were doing. Imitated them for a while. Did not like that. It wasn't me. I wasn't happy. I was micromanaging and becoming a perfectionist and workaholic. It wasn't good. All the bad mindsets.
Been there.
Yeah, a lot of us have. And it's easy to fall into those traps and it's really hard to pull out.
Mhm.
But so I lacked mentorship, I lacked models, I lacked training. So what I started doing was I started thinking about leadership as a discipline, as something I could study, just like I'd studied English. I made it my second discipline. I started going to conferences and trainings, reading books, finding out as much as I could from people. I still had no mentorship. In fact, I spent my entire life without any real mentorship. And um, got better and better at it, made a lot of mistakes, learned from my mistakes. I also learned from other people's mistakes. I call that learning from the negative paradigm. That's important. When you see somebody
Sure
else
is.
messing up, don't do that,
Come on. Come on. Yeah.
Especially if it's your boss, right? You're a boss and you have a boss and you don't like what your boss is doing, don't do that.
Yeah, take notes.
Right? It might not be the opposite thing of what they do. It often isn't, but just don't do that. So basic rules like that. Had a really big insight early on. I'm a classroom teacher, and I realized that every leadership problem is a teaching problem. And the more you dive into that, the more you realize that there is no real distinction between a great teacher and a great leader. None.
Mm,
Every single quality that makes you a great teacher makes you a great leader, and vice versa.
that's
Um,
good.
it's really a big deal. And most teachers don't see themselves as leaders, and most leaders don't see themselves as teachers. Big deal. These are some of the things I started realizing. Eventually, I moved on from that school. I became a vice president at another school, and then was a vice president at another school after that, and then left higher ed altogether and thought, what do I want to do? Well, one of the things I loved about being an administrator, and I really loved being an administrator, I really enjoyed it. But one of the things I loved most about it was I got to work with younger people and I helped them become great leaders. I mentored them, I coached them, I taught them the lessons I had learned, and tried them out and got them up and running. And a lot of those people are out there doing great things right now. And so I decided that's what I want to do for a living, and that's what I do. So
I love it.
my goal is to take today's young bosses and guide them to become the next generation of great leaders.
The next generation. I love it. I love it. I love it. There was like 3 things in what you said that I almost feel like I could spend the rest of the interview on because they're so pivotal, right?
Yeah.
The first thing you talked about that I heard early on was you talked about this concept of the gut leadership, right? And when I thought of that, I thought, well, the interesting thing about that kind of leadership is that anything that you do with your gut will ultimately affect your heart. Right? And so there are some leaders who, because they got gut punched early on in life, they no longer show up the way they used to. Their feelings get hurt, their courage and confidence gets fractured, and they no longer show up with that courage, or things get to their gut then go to their head. So if you guess right a couple of times because you really are just like doing guesswork to figure things out, you begin to develop something where you can become unteachable, right? Where you start to become hardened. Have you ever seen a hardened gut, right? That suddenly now you think you know everything because you've known something. And ultimately it is teaching and learning and growing that helps us overcome both of those types of paradigms. When it comes to that gut leadership, I guess the first question would be, what are the benefits of it when a person has that kind of natural leadership ability? And then what would you say are the things that if a person is a natural leader, they have to be cautious of?
Yeah, well, I think you sketched out a bunch of them right there. The things they need to be cautious of. So when you have that got that acumen, right? That idea that you can lead. You're pretty good at it. It's kind of, think about like anything like in sports, right? Running. If you're a good runner, some people are just better runners than others naturally for a bunch of different reasons. Some of which is just genetic, whatever. Has nothing to do with anything they did or earned. They're just better at it. And that can happen with leadership, but it's not going to make you great. To be a great runner, you have to practice. You have to learn the techniques of running. You have to work out. You have to put the work in. Um, so the thing is, and this is what I learned, you can't rely on your gut leadership to carry you through every inch of the way.
Mhm.
You need to be self-aware for one thing, right? You need to understand who you are. A great deal of leadership is self-awareness, knowing who you are, knowing how you can be better. Not perfect, never perfect, better. Perfection, you set yourself up for failure. That's
That's
another
so
thing that
good.
happens, right? People,
Absolutely.
you cannot be perfect. You can't. Okay. So stop trying because you're always going to fail. And when you always fail, you become embittered. And when you become
Can you
embittered,
explain that? Explain
okay.
that. Yeah.
Well, okay. So if you're going for perfection, you can't do it. So you will fail by definition. When you fail, that hurts and it makes people angry. And that's why perfectionists often are so hard on other people around them, right? Because they see imperfections in others. They become very judgmental because they're embittered. And it's the opposite of leadership, falling into that. So you don't want to go for that. You want to go for self-improvement. You want to get better. Better is always possible. Perfect is never possible,
Very good.
right?
How do you distinguish between the striving for perfection and the striving for excellence? How do you distinguish those two things?
Perfection means just that. You never make a mistake. That's impossible, right? Every decision you make is absolutely bang on. You never wake up in the morning or in a bad mood, right? You don't have to think about those things because you're perfect, right? It's an act of arrogance, right? Excellence is a goal, right? You're setting a goal. And the thing about excellence is once you're excellent, you can always be a little more excellent. Go for it, right? It's never ending. Leadership is a never ending path. Like anything we're doing, you have to strive, you have to work. You have to adjust, you have to assess, right? There's an assessment loop involved, right? You have to look at what you're doing, you have to see whether it's any good, then you have to make adjustments. And that's how you improve, right? It's like learning any skill. You can always do a better job. Um, Perfection is an end game. Once you've declared yourself perfect, you're done.
Here's the interesting thing. When my team and I sit down and look at our analytics, we find that the chances are that you, yes, I'm actually talking about you right now, that you are not subscribed to this channel. And so I just wanted to jump on and give you an official invitation. Would you please join us in subscribing to the channel? I'm so excited about the upcoming interviews that we have, some tremendous people, and I want to make sure that you don't miss it. This is going to give you an opportunity to get weekly inspiration that could take your leadership, take your organization, take your personal life to the next level. So would you go ahead and subscribe? And then don't keep this just to yourself. Would you share this episode with a friend, a family member, a coworker, an employee, someone who needs this weekly information? Let's get you into this week's episode.
It has a clear and definite ending versus a continuation of growth. And there's something that you said in that I think that someone could really glean from. One of the things that I heard you saying is if it's all about self-assessment, which is something you've already said, and then you say there has to be an assessment loop, how are you doing? That tells me that one of the things that many leaders leave out is that they assess the project every few months, they assess the business every few months, but they don't always assess how they're showing up in leadership to the project and to the business. And so, really, what I have to do more often is say, how am I? Who am I? How is it? And how is it showing up? I have to really have a full assessment as often as possible. How do you think leaders can become more self-aware of how they're showing up as leaders?
Yeah. First off, that was beautifully put. I wish I wrote that down, but I'm glad this is recorded. But yeah, that I mean, there's a variety of ways, and you should do all of them, right?
Mm,
Part of it is knowing your values, and there's ways of determining what your values are.
yes.
Make sure they're the right values. Make sure you really adhere to those values. You behave. Your behavior is driven by those values. That's a constant assessment you need to make. Say what your values are. Write them down. Talk about them. It's self-checking, right? It's a way of accounting for yourself, right? If you tell people you have integrity, they're going to notice whether you act with integrity or not, right? So you better step it up. Um, so there's that accountability built in. The other thing is to get feedback from people. If there's people over you, get feedback from them. if they're any good. If they're not very good, you might not care. From your peers, if possible, and also from your team members, whoever's under you in your leadership. How can ask them? You have to set up a culture of accessibility, of openness, of transparency, right?
Ooh,
People need to be able to come.
can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
How does someone establish that?
Yeah, so I practice something I call radical transparency. And this is the idea is that you are so open, it's almost to a fault. Now, I don't mean you go up to people and start whining at them, but you let them know your vulnerabilities. If you're in a meeting, you're leading a meeting, and you're suddenly unsure of something, some people are like, "Whoa, act tough, fake it till you make it," blah blah. Yeah, okay, that's fine. That'll take you so far. But if for a long run goal, tell people, "I'm not sure what we're doing here. I'm confused. I don't understand. I don't know. You're not perfect. You're not a genius. Get other people to help you figure it out, but let them know who you are." Now, there's people who will see that as a weakness.
Sure.
The funny thing is, when they try to exploit it, it usually backfires on them, right?
Mhm.
Because it's actually a strength. It takes a lot of strength to practice radical transparency, to show that kind of vulnerability. And when you do that, you start getting feedback from people. I used to love when people would come to me and say, "Hey, Jim, you know, I think you're being kind of a jerk here." Thank you. I've reward that. That's really helpful feedback. You can even do formal things. Like I worked when I was a dean, the university I worked at, we didn't really have any formal assessment from the people who worked for us, right? So I had faculty under me. And so what I did was I created a survey, an anonymous survey that gave me the kind of feedback I wanted. And then I took that survey, and here's where the radical transparency part comes in. And I put it up, I made slides out of it, put it up on slides, and we had a meeting and we talked about it as we went through. Right.
Wow.
And this is me on the PowerPoint, showing my vulnerability. It's like, okay, I need to step it up here. Does anybody want to explain why? What do you think? What's going on here? So I knew how they saw me, because that's what leadership is. It's how you see yourself and how others see you. Right.
Yes, I can hear how well aligned we are, and it's funny as you were answering, you made me feel more sane in some ways because you know how sometimes when you develop your principles, your own guiding principles, you see that sometimes they're countercultural. And I have been around so many leaders who have that fake it till you make it mentality. Everything is always right. I'm always fine. Everything's okay. And you're looking at them in the eyes knowing it's not true and it's not real. And it made me think about I had a client recently and he'd had a major life breakthrough and he was sitting with me and he was giving me, I'm about to reapproach things in my office and we've had a rough year, but now I'm going to bounce back and I'm going to do these things these ways. And I've learned these lessons. And he got to the end and I said, "So when are you going to tell them?" And he said, "I wasn't planning on doing that." And I said, "Don't you think your team needs to hear your growth, right?" There's so much that can be unlocked with transparency, but for some reason we have a culture that tells us that transparency, vulnerability, and openness are like cuss words, bad things, and weaknesses.
Sure.
Where do you think that comes from?
Oh, it comes from our the macho aspect of our culture. You know, you watch a Western, you don't see any too much vulnerability there, right? Except on rare occasions. It's just that tough guy mentality. We have this attitude toward leaders, especially bosses. And again, I make a distinction between leaders and bosses. But this idea that they're these know-it-all centers, right? You go to the boss to find out the real thing, and the boss has to keep certain secrets. I've also known, I used to get in an argument with a fellow dean all the time because she was always angry at me because something would be going on in the upper administration, and I would tell my faculty. There are certain things you couldn't tell me. You couldn't tell them HR things and but I would tell them what was going on at the university. And she specifically didn't tell her faculty because her argument was, "Oh, they got too many other things to worry about. They shouldn't be bothered." How patronizing, right? And I treated my people like the professionals and adults they were, and they respected that. And the irony was, of course, her people were going to my people, and this is why she was always ticked off at me. Her people were going to my people to find out what the straight stuff was, and being angry at her because she didn't tell them. And it's like, well, they want to know. Don't you get it? If they're asking my people, they want to know. But didn't phase her at all. She wouldn't give that up. So there's no real reason for it. It's all bad reasons. But a lot of it is it's scary. It's hard to be vulnerable. Right?
It's hard to lead.
It's hard to lead. It's hard. It requires what we call soft skills, which are the hardest skills of all.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Let's talk about that a little bit, because we've already established, okay, they tell you in life that there's these natural born leaders, but what we really know is that leaders have to be learners. You have to be continuously learning and continuously growing and all these things. Where does a person start? Maybe there's somebody there listening right now. I don't care if they're leading in the boardroom, they're leading at home, they're leading in a classroom, wherever it is. They're a leader already by title, by definition, and yet they feel ill-equipped. Where do they begin to really grow as a leader?
Yeah, so they hire me as a coach. No, a lot of it has to do with that sense of self. So I talk about something called the 4 C's of leadership. It's my signature talk. The first C, and these are in order because they build on each other. The first C is character. Character is your values and your behaviors, who you are, who you show up as. When you walk in the room, who walks in that room? Is that person different than the person who walks into the kitchen at home? Right? If you haven't, I've seen people who are really tough bosses, throwing around their weight, really nasty people, and then they go home and they're really sweet to their families. That's messed up. That's messed up. That shows that you have enough sense to be a decent human, but you choose not to? Oh my God. Right?
Can you go farther with that?
Sure.
Can you explain why that's a problem? Because somebody just heard that and they said, but that's how it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to be different at home than I am in the office. Why is that not a good thing?
Well, I mean, there will be differences, of course. I mean, just the way you speak and whatnot, that's fine. I'm talking about your fundamental core behaviors and your values. Compartmentalizing is a lie, right? If you're one way here and another way there in radically different ways, you're being dishonest somewhere, maybe everywhere. And it has to do with integrity.
Woo! You said if you are compartmentalizing where you are one place in one place and you're one thing in another place, there is a lie somewhere.
Yeah.
I just wanted to sit in that for a moment. I hope somebody heard that, because I've been it, right? I've experienced that. And deep down, you're lying somewhere, if not everywhere, because you feel like a fraud. There's your imposter syndrome, right? You feel literally like a fraud and a fake.
Yeah. Because you are.
Oh, man.
You've earned your imposter syndrome. You're an imposter. Yeah, I mean, it's true. So it has to do with integrity. And so the way I think about integrity, we talk about moral integrity, human integrity, but another definition of integrity is like the integrity of an object, like a table, right? Or a chair, right? If you have a chair, if that chair has integrity, it is solid, right? It is whole. It's not missing any parts. If it's missing a leg, it's not a good chair, right? And it's dependable. It's exactly the same thing for moral integrity. It needs to be solid. It needs to be dependable, and it needs to be whole. And that's where your integrity has to be throughout your life. It has to be whole. If you behave one way in the boardroom and another way at home, there's a problem there, right? Even if you behave one way dealing with the budget and another way dealing with HR, there's a problem there, right? This is dishonest. You don't have integrity. You are not centered, right? You have no center. You shift. How can you operate if you don't have a center? Leadership is about values. You base it on your values. You need to be centered on your values in order to lead. Otherwise, it all just falls apart. And people know. People know. They may be scared of you, but they don't respect you. And they may follow you because they have to, because you're the boss or something, but that's not leadership. And the number one reason, by the way, people leave positions isn't because of money, right? They leave positions because of bad bossing.
Cut.
Okay, that's a wrap.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy, Jody Eric Matthews, the director of King of the Block. And I just want to say, if it's Monday, I'm watching Hope Rising with Maurice.
Whew. So we have this character piece, and essentially what you're saying is a person who doesn't have good character or who doesn't have a focus on character, they're not whole in some way, right? And so, obviously reassessing those values. I think that it's so important for people to know the values you have don't have to be the values you have moving forward. That a reevaluation of your values is okay, right? Maybe mom taught me some values and dad taught me some values and the last boss taught me some values. But an assessment of those values is okay. So we get to that character. What comes after the character?
Communication.
Mm.
So communication is key. Another thing about leadership is all about relationships. You can't build relationships without communication. And your communication divides up into three pieces roughly. Okay? You have a message that you need to deliver that is valuable. You have an audience that is receptive and that you understand, and you have clarity. Okay? In order to have that message, though, to be valuable, you need values. It isn't valuable unless you have values. You're just yakking otherwise, right? So what informs communication? Character.
Mm. So they go hand in hand.
Yeah. Yep.
That's so real. I don't think people think of it that way. I think some people think of communication as something that you're either good at or you're not, and they think of character as just you being you, and it is what it is because I am who I am, right? And you're essentially saying that both of these things are interwoven, intertwined, and that they both can be worked on.
Oh yeah, everything can be worked on. Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then what's the next C?
Compromise.
Ooh, that's a cuss word.
Well, and compromise has its negative thing. Like, you say, oh, the head gasket was compromised and the engine broke down, but that isn't what we mean by it. Compromise is simply meeting some way part way, give and take, right? It's very transactional. I meet you part way, you meet me part way. It doesn't have to be halfway. It could be, whatever it is, but we both give something up in order to reach some sort of an agreement. Again, very transactional, a lot of give and take. You cannot have compromise without communication, right? And you can't have good communication without character. Again, they're all part of a piece, right? So, so compromise is really important in that sense. It gets you moving. It helps you build relationships.
Mm. It's interesting because I thought of what character and compromise without character kind of looks like. I was imagining, the horse with the carrot out in front of it, and you just keep putting the carrot farther and farther away, and the horse keeps moving, right? And that tends to be how a lot of leaders lead, right? Is that they know that their employee wants something, and so they dangle something in front of them to get the work done, never actually meeting them where they are, always requiring for the employee to go farther and deeper and wider into things, and eventually those workers get burned out
Yeah.
because no one ever meets their needs.
Right. Yeah. Right. They never get to eat that carrot. Right. And the thing is, horses are extremely intelligent animals. And you know what? Your workers are even more intelligent than horses. And the horses will figure it out. You'll figure it out.
They sure will, and you sure will. Oh man, we've all been there. Yes,
Yeah.
so good. Because this is good because if you don't learn to healthily compromise, you leave your employees compromised.
Oh, love it. Love it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what is our fourth C?
Collaboration.
Mm.
So collaboration, unlike compromise, is not transactional, but you need compromise to get there. You need to be able to meet people part way in order to get the collaboration, which is the highest level really of leadership. It is the goal of leadership to get people to work together, right? Collaboration is the opposite of competition. True competition is a zero-sum game. There's a winner and there's a loser, right? If you're winning a little, I'm losing somehow. It's a zero-sum game. Compromise is a win-win. Everybody wins when you compromise. That's how you build. That's how you build relationships, how you build on relationships. And again, you need the other three C's to get the collaboration.
That sounds so counter to what we've often been taught. We live in a very competitive world, a very competitive society. And so even within the halls and the walls of a business, people are often competing against one another. How do people get past the societal pressure of competition?
Yeah, it's hard because you really need, well, you need to compromise. But it is hard because so many things are set up. We think that if people are competing against one another, that drives them. And that does work to an extent in certain situations. And everybody points to elite athletes who are driven by compromise, by competition. They see their peer doing well, so they excel themselves. Blah blah. Yeah, except in the end, there's a winner and a loser, right? And maybe they drove each other, but those are pretty freakish human beings when you think about it. They're elite. We call them elite for a reason.
And can I jump in and,
Yeah.
and add something? When you were talking earlier today and you were saying leadership is teaching, I was thinking about coaches. Not like coaches like we are, but I'm talking about athletic coaches that I've heard many head coaches and other coaches in sports say a great coach is a great teacher. That coaching is teaching. Well, those elite athletes that you're talking about have coaches and mentors. So yes, they may be fueled by the competition across from them, but they still have leadership and coaching and training and compromise and communication and all those things within their camp and within their team.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a different, we're looking at these isolated incidents and extrapolating from that. It's like I don't really like leadership books and leadership gurus who look at top corporate leaders and say, oh, what are their secrets? That doesn't interest me at all, because a lot of their stuff is just, it doesn't really apply to the rest of humanity. And frankly, a lot of times they're not good leaders. And if they were really good leaders, they'd be even more successful than they are. But I'm more interested in the individual, right? Coming as they are. Almost everybody has a goodness in them. Maybe everybody does, but everybody has some degree of human decency. That's where you start. You asked me before, how do you start? Tap into your human decency. Take your ego, shove it in a sack, and throw it in the river over and over and over again. Trust me, it won't drown. It'll get out of that sack. It'll be right back to you. But it's a good exercise. You need to exercise humility. It's a muscle that you need to exercise. And you do that by tapping into your human decency and seeing others as people you can help. If you're a manager and you have employees and your number one goal isn't to make your employees better at their jobs, you're not good at yours. You're incompetent.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, bold words, but true words, right? And I take these lessons. They apply to literally everything.
Mm-hmm.
There have been times in my personal life, in my marriage, and things like that, where you ever tried to win an argument with somebody that you love? Let's be clear: if they're losing, so are you, because we're all supposed to be winning, right?
Right.
So if whatever it is that I'm managing, whatever it is that I'm stewarding over, if I am not making what I have my hands on better, something's wrong and it needs to be addressed. Period. It's really that cut and dry. Honestly. Oh, that's so good. I have enjoyed this conversation so far. And so one of the things that I know that you teach about is this importance of tiny habits, that a person who wants to transform, a leader that wants to change, they really have to focus on the tiny habits. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm a certified Tiny Habits coach, and Tiny Habits is a system that was developed by Dr. BJ Fogg, who's a Stanford researcher. He runs the Stanford Behavior Change Laboratory, and he's done the work. He's done the studying. This is scientific, scientifically based. This isn't made up. It isn't, you hear things like, oh, it's 22 days to a new habit or 6 months to a new habit. None of that's true. Time has nothing to do with forming habits. One of his big insights is that habits are formed through emotions. Every habit you have, there's an emotion attached. It might be good, bad, indifferent, whatever, but there's some emotion that was attached to it. And another big insight he had was every behavior consists of 3 elements: motivation, right? Whether you want to do it or not, ability, whether you can do it or not, and a prompt, something that gets you to do it, right? Every behavior you have in your life is driven by those 3 things. And we often focus on motivation. Motivation is a dead end because motivation is slippery. It rises and it falls, right? Everybody rushes to the gym in January, and by February they're empty because they lost their motivation, right? You say, I'm going to go to the gym every day of the week. I'm motivated. Well, then you miss one day because you're not so motivated. And next thing you know, I'm not going to go anymore, right? And then another time you might be motivated again. Who knows, Or you might be half motivated. Who knows? But it changes. Ability, though, is something we can often control. We can make things easier or harder to do. So instead of going to the gym every day, maybe cut it back. What's something that's easier to do, right? And it could be as simple as just putting on your gym clothes. Make it so remarkably easy. And then it's so easy, motivation doesn't matter. You're like, no big deal. I'll just put on my gym clothes. You don't have to go to the gym. That's your habit. You form a habit around that, and you use emotion to drive it home and to wire it in. And the emotion we use is celebration. So one of the things, one of the fog maxims, he calls it, is that we help people feel, not be, feel successful, right? And when you feel that emotion of success, that will lock in the habit. So you celebrate putting on those gym clothes. You celebrate that act, and you feel good, you feel successful, and next thing you know, you want to do it. And it becomes
Why
ritual.
why is truly feeling successful so important?
Well, you could use any emotion. It's just a better one. Right? I mean, I guess there's habits you have that are driven by fear and anxiety and things like that. Any emotion will work, but you can, it's a nice one. So let's do it. But also it's something you can actually generate. So we teach people how to learn to celebrate because as a culture, we're not real good at that. I know I wasn't good. I had to learn. There's techniques for learning how to celebrate. Find out what works for you. And some people, it's as simple as they just sit there and have a warm sense of, feeling good, for a couple minutes. Other people, they want to dance around the room. Some people celebrate with their kids, whatever it takes. They sing a song, they pump their fist in the air, whatever you do to celebrate, it will work. But it's that idea that you feel that success. And again, it could be, I guess you could use any emotion, but I wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder what you would think of this or what you would say in response to this. But one of my observations from coaching and counseling and the work that I've done personally as well is that celebration is so deeply tied to identity. Right. And so we have a society full of self-degradation. We degrade ourselves, we beat ourselves up, we beat ourselves down, we're hard on ourselves, as you said earlier, we're perfectionists. And so to celebrate something speaks to something very deeply inside of, wait a second, maybe I do have a winner in me. Maybe there is something worthwhile and worth believing in. And that self-belief ultimately is part of what catapults us to habits and life changes and moving in the right direction. So I feel like maybe part of the importance of the celebration is because of what it does, what it connects you to within your personal identity.
Yeah, I mean, it is very personal, right? Like I said, even the way you celebrate is personal. Some people keep it very private, right? They don't want anybody else to even know what their celebration is, because it is so personal. So I think that's a great insight. The other piece of this, which is important, is okay. So you put on your gym clothes. Well, eventually you're going to start like, well, maybe I'll go to the gym, right?
Right.
But yeah, it's something. Another maxim is that you want to help people do what they want to do. If you really don't want to go to the gym, find some other way of working out, right? Find some other way of getting exercise. Like I hate the gym personally, can't stand it. I don't want to be anywhere near a gym. So trying to get me there, I'm just going to be miserable. Why would I do that? Right? I'd rather do stuff at home. So I do stuff at home. So you want to build habits around things you really want to do, not,
What about the things that you don't want to do, but you need to do? How do you build the habits around that?
that could be harder. Find out what's good about it, right? If you need to do it, there's something good about it, right? If it's something you have to do because it's going to make you money, well, why do you want to make money? Well, I want to take care of my family. Oh, that's something to celebrate.
Back to our values.
Right to your values. And, another thing is with celebration is this is not the same thing as reward. This isn't, I'm going to go to the gym every day this week and then I get to eat chocolate ice cream on the weekend. That's a reward. That doesn't work. That really doesn't work. It has to be immediate. When you complete the behavior that you're aiming for, as simple as it is, you celebrate it immediately. Otherwise, it won't get locked in.
And so as these changed behaviors start to lock in, how does a person maintain success and maintain, that forward momentum?
Well, the fact that it's a habit, right? So I'll give you an example. I've created a tiny habit. We call them recipes. I created a tiny habit recipe that would get me to do 2 push-ups. I could do more push-ups, right? But I didn't want to do push-ups a whole lot, right? It was wasn't motivated to do a lot of push-ups. I'm going to do 2 push-ups, and I would celebrate it. And after a very short time, I don't remember, it was days or a week, I was like, yeah, I'm down on the floor. I can do 5. Now I do 120 a day, at least. I do them in blocks of 30. Right. And if you ever met me, I'm like a big workout guy or anything, but I do like over 100 push-ups every single day. Right. That started with 2. Right. Because you just start growing it because it feels good. Right. Suddenly it all starts feeling good. It feels like I'm being that feeling of success.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because one of the things that my wife and I were literally talking about this earlier is that in my life, I have often been such an all or nothing person that the first time I go to the gym, I go so hard and I can't see myself ever not going to the gym ever again. And I'm going to, for the rest of my life, I'm going to be in this gym. And then a couple of days later, when I don't have, what was that word, that motivation. And now I'm just like, didn't see this feeling coming, right?
Yeah.
And so I've learned how important it is for me to have habits that prepare for and plan for my feelings to come. Some things are predictable. Your resistance is predictable. You can see it coming. It's not a shock that someday you're not going to want to go to the gym.
Right.
What will you do when, right? And so what you just explained was so practical in so many different ways of life.
Yeah, it is. And by the way, tiny habits isn't just about going to the gym and working out.
At all. It's about changing a life.
Yeah, no, it's about learning the skills of change. I'll give your guests a gift here. So one of the most basic tiny habits is called the Maui Habit. And here's the recipe for it. When you first wake up in the morning, whatever it is you do that makes you know that you're awake. I'm not talking about like you're lying in bed, you open your eyes, but you put your feet on the floor. Some people make it all the way to the bathroom before they realize they're awake, looking in the mirror, brushing their teeth. But the moment every day when you know you're awake, at that moment, say to yourself with gusto, right? Say to yourself, today is going to be a great day. And then celebrate that. Throw your arms in the air, do whatever it is. Today is going to be a great day and feel that success. That will change how you start your day. And there's nothing more to that habit. You don't have to grow it at all. It's completely contained. That will change how you start your day.
Dr. Jim is going to get some people cussed out because they're going to get up first thing in the morning. Today is going to be a great day. Shut up. I'm still sleeping. No, but I love that. That's tying the start of the morning with setting your mind in the right place and really setting intention. That's really what you're doing, is setting your intentions, which is a great thing.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I used to get up in the morning and I would be like, for years, get out of bed, groaning and moaning. And then I started doing that. That's what I do. First thing.
Before I go any farther in this interview, if you have been listening and you haven't shared the video yet, or you haven't sent this to anybody, to a friend, to a family member yet, would you do that now, please? Have you clicked like on the video? If you're listening, maybe you're listening to this podcast somewhere, would you leave a comment? Would you leave your thoughts? Would you leave your feelings? How is this resonating with you? One thing I know, this is the type of conversation that can be a catalyst for real change and transformation. And speaking of a catalyst, Dr. Jim, I know that you have a new toolkit that you're using as a catalyst for leadership and leaders. Could you explain a little bit about that for us?
Yeah, it's greatleadershiptoolkit.com. And it's called the Transform to Greatness Toolkit. And it's a very simple thing. It's just 5 ways of developing your leadership skills. Very practical. You can apply them right away. And each one features a tiny habit recipe that'll help you get there.
Very good. So what was that website one more time?
It is the greatleadershiptoolkit.com.
Awesome. Greatleadershiptoolkit.com. So you guys either see that on your screens or you can see it in the description of this video. So feel free to go download that and take part in it. So Dr. Jim, before I let you go, before we wrap, there's a question that I ask all of my guests and that I have to ask you. So I want you to imagine that it is 100 years from now. And there is a museum of popular culture. And it's a museum where it really has taken the effects and artifacts of today and taken it and given it for those people. And there's a room inside of this museum that is marked hope. When someone walks into the museum and walks into this room, there is a time capsule with your name on it. And it has pictures of you teaching and coaching and doing different things. And then there's this clip. And on this clip, you explain someone who is in need of hope, searching for hope. Maybe it's a leader who's looking for hope. What would you tell them that hope means to you?
Yeah, hope is about it's about that Maui habit, right? Today's going to be a great day. It's recognizing that you can transform everything about your life any way you want. I mean, I grew up being told, this is the way the culture was. You are what you are, right? If you're a certain personality, that's your personality. And you can change aspects of your personality. You can change aspects of your behavior, and you can change your self-view. And a lot of hope is how you view yourself. It's not an arrogant thing. In fact, the best hope is altruistic, right? I hope I can make a difference. I'll tell you my greatest hope in life. I'm hoping that when I'm 90 or something, I'm lying on my deathbed, I look back on my life and I can demonstrate that the world is a better off place having had me in it than not.
Ooh, that's so good. That's something I think that all of us in the end would want to be able to say we can do.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. And Dr. Jim, if somebody wants to find you, somebody who does want to get coached by you and does want to work with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
The best thing to do is go to my website. My business is Guidance for Greatness. So you go to guidanceforgreatness.com. And another thing to do is to check out my newsletter and podcast, which is jimsalvucci.substack.com. And the podcast is really just me reading an essay every week. But a lot of people like to listen to it rather than read it.
Well, one of the things that I hope that everyone listened to and heard was that we got such great guidance for greatness today. If you've been watching, if you've been listening, what I hope that you took from this conversation is that, yes, maybe people are born with leadership traits. Maybe some people have that certain genetic thing in them that makes them natural born leaders. But even those who are natural born leaders need to grow, need to mature, and need to embrace the journey of leadership. Whether you get a mentor or a coach like Dr. Jim, or you go in another way, in other means, I want to challenge you to know that where you are today as a leader shouldn't be where you are next year as a leader. Challenge yourself to grow, because that's where hope grows. The hope comes as you cultivate your gifts and your talents and your treasures that you bring to the world. And one of the things that I know about the world is that my world is better today because of this interview. So again, thank you, Dr. Jim, for joining. It's been a great interview.
Thank you, Maurice. This is wonderful.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for the rest of you, As always, I'm just so thankful that you have joined today. I hope that you got what you needed out of it. If you haven't yet, leave those comments. What were your greatest takeaways? What were the big aha moments that you had? Leave those comments. Send this to a friend. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do. And then I will look forward to seeing you next week on Hope Rising, where the unfulfilled go for fulfillment and the uninspired go for a dose of inspiration. We'll see you soon.